There exists, throughout the 17,000 documented civilizations of the known galaxy, a universal truth so fundamental that it transcends species, culture, and evolutionary biology. Military rations are absolutely, categorically, magnificently terrible. This is not an accident. This is science. Nutritional engineers across 1 million worlds have spent centuries perfecting the art of cramming maximum caloric density, vitamin content, and protein synthesis into packages that taste like despair wrapped in disappointment. The logic is impeccable. Soldiers who enjoy their food might want to stay in one place and eat it, rather than, soldiering. The Joint Species Military Outpost on Verdis 7 had exactly 4,612 of these nutritional abominations in storage, quite sensibly, by species dietary requirements. Saurian rations fortified with calcium carbonate and trace metals, Chitauri rations loaded with cellulose enzymes and chitin precursors, Luminar rations that were basically batteries you could chew, and human rations that looked like brown rectangles and presumably tasted like military efficiency. Each species' rations were, naturally, incompatible with every other species' digestive system. Some were merely indigestible, others were actively toxic. This was considered a feature, not a bug, because it prevented ration theft during multi-species deployments. The problem, which became apparent on day 17 of the bureaucratic snafu that stranded the outpost without resupply, was that cross-species toxicity works both ways. And when your supply officer accidentally contaminates the entire food storage facility with a cleaning solution that renders everything inedible regardless of species, you discover that your carefully designed nutritional segregation has just become a mutual starvation pact. Commander Threx stood in the ruined storage bay, his secondary eyelids clicking in the Saurian equivalent of a migraine. He was 7 feet of scaled, cold-blooded tactical precision, with a service record that included 2 campaigns, 4 decorations, and 0 tolerance for cosmic irony. Yet here he was, staring at 4,000 protein blocks that now qualified as hazardous waste. How, he said, his voice carrying that particular tone of someone whose faith in military logistics had just died screaming, did we manage to poison our own food supply? Lieutenant Voss, whose species had conquered interstellar travel by being very, very good at not making mistakes, clicked her mandibles in profound discomfort. The cleaning drone misidentified the storage bay as a weapons depot. It deployed Industrial Decontamination Protocol 7. Everything in there is now saturated with compounds that trigger violent immune responses in, approximately, all carbon-based life. Can we filter it out? Not without equipment we don't have, which was supposed to arrive on the supply ship, which is delayed. How delayed? Indefinitely delayed. There was a scheduling conflict with a diplomatic convoy, which took priority routing, which bumped the commercial traffic, which cascaded into, and I'm reading directly from the message here, a temporary reallocation of logistics infrastructure pending administrative review. Threx's tail performed a gesture that did not translate well but conveyed his feelings about administrative reviews with perfect clarity. How long can we survive on backup rations? Engineer Kohler, who existed as a vaguely humanoid arrangement of crystalline lattices and contained more computing power than most planetary networks, chimed in with a sound like wind through glass. Accounting for metabolic variance and emergency reserves, the Saurian complement has 9 days. Chitauri have 12. I can subsist on ambient electromagnetic radiation for approximately 6 weeks. And the human? There was a pause, the kind of pause that occurs when everyone in the room suddenly remembers something they'd been trying very hard to forget. Oh, Voss said. Right. The human. Private Jackson Reeves had been assigned to Outpost Verdis 7 for reasons that made sense to someone, somewhere, in the impenetrable machinery of military personnel allocation. He was not the first human to serve in a joint species unit. Humanity had been part of the galactic community for almost 40 years now, ever since they'd figured out faster-than-light travel by, essentially brute-forcing the physics until reality gave up and let them through. They were enthusiastic members of the interstellar community, if somewhat baffling ones. The thing about humans was that they came from a death world. Not the most dangerous death world. The galaxy had plenty of those, but definitely in the top percentile for evolutionary hostility. Earth was a planet that had spent 4 billion years trying to kill everything on it, and humanity had survived by developing the galaxy's most sophisticated sense of denial and a truly impressive capacity for eating things that shouldn't be food. Other species had noticed this. It made them nervous. Reeves was in the recreation room when Threx found him, doing something with pieces of string that might have been a craft project or a religious ritual. With humans, it was hard to tell. "Private," Threx said. "We have a situation." "Sir." Reeves looked up. He was average height for a human, which made him short by Saurian standards, with the kind of face that suggested he found most of the universe mildly amusing. His service record indicated he was from somewhere called Montana, which apparently explained something to other humans, but meant nothing to anyone else. "Our food supplies are compromised. We have 9 days of reserves. The resupply is delayed indefinitely." Reeves blinked. I'm informing all personnel so we can begin strict rationing protocols. Makes sense." Reeves went back to his string project. Threx waited. Humans, he had learned, often continued thoughts several seconds after they appeared to have finished them. So, Reeves said eventually, "What are we going to do about food? Survive on reserves until resupply arrives, or we arrange emergency evacuation." Right. Reeves nodded slowly. "But what are we going to eat?" "The reserve rations. That's what reserves are for." "Yeah, but those are poisoned." "They are not. They've been contaminated, yes. But, so we can't eat them." Threx felt his temperature drop, which was not a good sign. "Correct." "Cool." Reeves set down his string. "I'll just go outside then." The silence that followed was the kind of silence that occurs when someone has said something so profoundly wrong that reality needs a moment to process it. "Outside," Threx repeated. "Yeah, outside the outpost." "Yep. Into the jungle. That's where outside is, yeah." Voss, who had joined them, performed a full-body shudder that ran through her exoskeleton like a wave. "Private, Verdis 7 is classified as a Level 9 biohazard environment. The entire planet is essentially a toxic waste dump that evolved predators." "Sure," Reeves agreed. "The local flora produces 17 different categories of alkaloid toxins," Kula added, projecting a holographic chart that looked like a periodic table designed by a particularly creative serial killer. "The water supply contains sulfuric compounds that would dissolve most organic tissue. The atmosphere has a spore count that would trigger anaphylactic shock in 93% of known species. And that's before we discuss the fauna." "Right." I read the briefing. Reeves stood up and stretched. "Sounds like outside. Sounds like it's a death trap. I mean, statistically most places are." Reeves headed toward the equipment lockers. "You guys need anything while I'm out there?" The 3 aliens exchanged looks that conveyed several hours of conversation in a fraction of a second. They had all been trained in xenopsychology. They understood that humans had different threat assessment protocols, but this was beyond different. This was deranged. "Private Reeves," Threx said carefully, using the tone normally reserved for talking down armed hostiles. "I cannot authorize you to leave the outpost. It would be suicide." "Okay, but like I'm going to starve if I stay here. So how is that different? You would starve safely under controlled conditions with medical monitoring." "That does sound nice," Reeves admitted. He pulled out a field pack and started loading it with items that made no sense. A knife, a metal container, something that looked like string, a folding tool. "But I think I'll try the not starving thing first, just to see how it goes. The environment is hostile. So was Montana in winter, still had to eat." Voss's translator struggled with the comparison. Montana came through as a proper noun with associated metadata, suggesting it was a geographic region characterized by low temperatures and large herbivores. "You're comparing your homeworld's climate variations to a planet-wide toxic ecosystem. I mean, Montana has bears, and wolves, and winter. You ever try to grow food when it's 40 below? We managed." He paused at the airlock. "Look, I appreciate the concern, but humans have been doing this finding food in hostile environments thing for like 200,000 years. We're pretty okay at it." "You're going to die," Kohler said flatly. "Probably not today, though." Reeves gave them a thumbs up, which the aliens had learned was a positive gesture, despite looking vaguely threatening, and cycled through the airlock. For a long moment, nobody moved. "Should we stop him?" Voss asked. "How?" Threx pulled up Reeves's biosigns on his command tablet. Heart rate elevated but steady. Respiration normal. Brain activity showed the patterns associated with what humans called concentration. "He's not violating any direct orders. I didn't actually forbid him from leaving." "We should monitor his vital signs," Kohler suggested. "For the official report when he dies." They monitored his vital signs. Reeves made it 15 minutes into the jungle before his biosigns did something alarming. They stabilized. His heart rate dropped to resting levels. His respiration became deep and regular. According to the sensors, he was relaxed. "This doesn't make sense," Voss muttered, watching the data stream. "He's been exposed to 17 different airborne toxins, walked through 3 separate patches of plants that secrete contact poisons, and something with a heat signature consistent with an ambush predator just passed within 5 meters of him. Maybe the equipment is malfunctioning," Threx suggested without conviction. They watched for another hour. Reeves moved through the jungle with what the motion trackers described as low-threat awareness patterns. He stopped occasionally, and the audio feed picked up sounds of him doing something, cutting, digging. The translator couldn't pass it. 2 hours in, he started talking to himself. This was apparently normal human behavior, but it still made everyone uncomfortable. "Okay, so these mushrooms are definitely not safe. But if I boil them twice and dump the water, maybe, need to test that. These berries though, these are interesting. Smell right. Color's good. Okay, universal edibility test time." "What," Kohler asked the room at large, "is a universal edibility test?" Nobody knew. They watched with mounting confusion as Reeves's biosigns remained stubbornly stable. Whatever he was doing out there, it wasn't killing him. This violated several fundamental assumptions about Verdis 7's ecosystem. 3 hours after he'd left, the airlock cycled again. Reeves walked in carrying a bag full of things that made the 3 aliens recoil in instinctive horror. Plant matter, fungi, something that might have been an animal carcass, or might have been a particularly ambitious vegetable. All of it was from the toxic death jungle outside. "Hey," Reeves said cheerfully. "Anyone got a spare burner I can use? The fab unit's probably overkill for this." Threx found his voice first. "What are those?" "Dinner. Well, hopefully. Some of it needs processing first. Reeves dumped his collection onto a work table in the common area. The smell alone triggered threat warnings in everyone's environmental suits. Okay, so most of this is toxic raw, but that's fine. Lots of earth food is toxic raw. You just gotta, cook it. Cook it. Voss approached the pile like it might explode, which, given the chemical composition of some of those plants, was not impossible. You're going to apply heat to toxic biomass and then consume it. Yeah, that's pretty much cooking. Reeves was already sorting through his collection with the confidence of someone who had done this before. See these tubers here? They've got cyanogenic glycosides. Same family as cassava back home. You boil them, dump the water, boil them again. You break down the toxins. These mushrooms are tricky. They've got some kind of nerve agent, but it's heat level, so if I just... He kept talking. The aliens stopped listening and started staring as Reeves, with the casual efficiency of someone following a recipe they'd memorized, began processing deadly jungle plants into something that resembled food. He had somehow fabricated a crude heating element from spare parts. He had containers. He had, and this was perhaps most disturbing, clearly planned this. You knew, Threx said slowly. You knew the rations were compromised before I told you. I mean, everyone was acting weird this morning. Figured something was up with food. Usually is. Reeves dumped bright purple tubers into boiling water. This happened at a forward base I was stationed at back home. Supply convoy got hit by a storm. We were cut off for 2 weeks. You learn to improvise. By eating the landscape. By eating what's available. Yeah, food's food once you make it safe. Cola's crystalline structure flickered with what might have been fascination or horror. You're describing a systematic approach to rendering toxic biomass into nutritional intake. This is not improvisation. This is a developed survival protocol. I mean, I guess, my grandma taught me foraging when I was like 8. Said you never know when you'll need to live off the land. Reeves tested the water, dumped it, added fresh water from his canteen, started boiling again. Most of survival is just knowing what'll kill you and what won't, and how to turn the will kill you stuff into won't kill you stuff. Most survival is staying away from things that will kill you. Voss countered. Sure, if you can, but if you can't, you make do. He pulled out the mushrooms, sliced them thin and started a second heating process. The smell changed from threateningly toxic to merely alarming. These should be safe in about 20 minutes. Might not taste great, but they won't kill me. How do you know? Reeves shrugged. Tested a small piece raw on my skin. No reaction. Tested on my lips. Slight tingle but no swelling. Put a tiny piece on my tongue, waited. Little bitter but no burning. Swallowed a small piece, waited 4 hours. No symptoms. That means it's probably safe in small amounts, and cooking will break down whatever's left. The 3 aliens stared at him. You, Threx said, deliberately exposed yourself to unknown toxins. As a testing methodology. I mean, yeah? How else would I know if it's safe? By not eating it. But then I'd be hungry. Reeves said this like it was the most obvious thing in the universe. Look, you guys want some? I can't guarantee it'll work with your biology, but I could probably figure out what's safe for you. Just need to run some tests. The answer was obviously no. The answer was clearly, certainly, absolutely no. You did not eat alien vegetation processed by a human using techniques that apparently predated spaceflight. That was how you died embarrassingly and became a cautionary tale. But they were going to starve in 9 days, and the human was still alive. What, Voss asked against her better judgment, would testing involve? Over the next week, Outpost Verdis 7 became something that would have given military inspectors a collective aneurysm. Reeves went into the jungle daily, returning with bags of vegetation, fungi, and occasional small creatures that he processed using methods that looked like witchcraft and worked like science. He maintained detailed notes on what was safe for which species, cross-referencing toxicity profiles with metabolic requirements. Turns out, saurian digestion could handle certain alkaloid compounds that would kill most species, but only after the plant matter was fermented for 36 hours. Chitauri could actually process some of the local insect analogues, but they needed to be dried and ground first to break down the exoskeleton. Kohler discovered that several of the local crystals were basically food, though Reeves insisted on calling them rock candy for reasons nobody understood. The human could eat almost anything after processing. This seemed to be his species' superpower, aggressive omnivory backed by elaborate preparation techniques. "Your species developed cooking," Kohler observed one evening, watching Reeves prepare something that smelled startlingly edible as a survival adaptation. "Well, yeah, fire was one of our first technologies." Reeves stirred a pot that contained 3 types of vegetation, 1 type of fungi, and something that might have been protein. "You can't digest most things raw. Cooking breaks down cell walls, denatures proteins, neutralizes toxins, expands your diet by like 10 times. Most species evolved to eat specific things," Voss pointed out. "We specialized. Humans couldn't afford to specialize. Earth kept trying to kill us, so we learned to eat everything that didn't eat us first. Sometimes we ate those things too." He tasted his creation, added something from a small container, salt. "That's the secret." "Well, one of the secrets. Fat is another one. Acid, heat. You combine those right, you can make almost anything edible." Threx, who had been avoiding the humans' cooking experiments on principle, finally broke down on day 6 when his emergency rations ran out. He watched Reeves prepare a soup from tubers, greens, and a broth made from boiled roots. "This won't kill me?" he asked. "Probably not. I tested everything on myself first. Your metabolism is different, but I accounted for that. Worst case, you'll have some digestive discomfort. Worst case, I die. I mean, yeah, that's technically possible, but I'm pretty confident about this batch." Pretty confident. Threx was about to risk his life on pretty confident. He was a military commander. He had led troops into combat. He had made decisions that determined whether people lived or died. And now he was going to eat experimental soup made by a human from a death world because the alternative was starvation. He ate the soup. It was not good, but it wasn't toxic, and it filled the gnawing emptiness that had been growing in his stomach for days. "Huh," he said. "Yeah," Reeves agreed. "It's food." By day 12, when the supply ship finally arrived, the outpost had transformed into something unrecognizable. There were drying racks outside the airlock. There were fermentation containers in the storage bay that had once held rations. There were detailed charts showing which local plants were safe for which species after proper preparation. Threx had gained weight. Voss had discovered she liked the dried insect analogues more than her species' rations. Kohler had calculated that the local crystal formations provided better energy density than standard luminar nutrition blocks. The supply ship captain, a veteran saurian named Kresh, who had seen everything the galaxy had to offer, walked into the outpost and stopped dead. "What?" he asked slowly. "Am I looking at?" "Dinner," Threx said. He was eating something from a bowl. It steamed slightly. It smelled like food rather than nutritional efficiency. "Where are your rations?" "Compromised. Industrial accident. Contaminated the entire storage." Kresh's thermal sensors spiked. "All of them. But that was... How did you survive?" We adapted. Threx gestured toward the common area, where Reeves was teaching Voss some kind of food preparation technique involving cutting vegetables. The human showed us how. The human. Kresh looked at Reeves, looked at the drying racks, looked at the fermentation vessels, looked back at Threx. The human taught you to eat the jungle. More or less. The jungle on Verdis 7, the level 9 biohazard zone. Turns out, Threx said, most of it's edible if you know how to process it, which humans do. Because apparently, that's just a thing they can do. Kresh stared at his datapad, where he was supposed to be logging an emergency situation and probable casualties. He looked at the healthy, well-fed crew. He looked at the human, who was explaining something about root vegetables with the enthusiasm of someone discussing a hobby. I'm going to need, he said eventually, a very detailed report about this. Threx's report, when it finally made its way up through military channels, became something of a legend. It was dry, factual, and followed proper formatting guidelines. It also described in technical detail how a single human had prevented a starvation crisis by teaching 3 different species to forage and process local vegetation using pre-industrial food preparation techniques. The report concluded with a line that would be quoted in xenobiology courses for the next decade. Private Reeves demonstrated that humanity's primary survival adaptation is not their death world physiology, but their fundamental inability to accept that anything is inedible. Given sufficient time and heat, they will attempt to eat their environment. This should be considered both a tactical asset and a standing biohazard warning. Somewhere in the logistics department, someone updated the protocol manual. The new entry read, in the event of food supply failure in joint species deployments, consult human personnel. They probably know what to do. Because the galaxy had spent millions of years developing sophisticated food production, preservation and distribution systems. They had nutritional science. They had agricultural engineering. They had the kind of logistics networks that could feed billions across light years of space. And humanity had looked at all of that, nodded politely, and continued doing what they'd been doing since before they discovered fire, finding things to eat and figuring out how to make them less deadly. Sometimes sophistication lost to stubbornness, sometimes science lost to spite, and sometimes the most advanced solution was just to find a human and let them go outside. After all, they'd been doing this for quite a while.